A week after my friend Bill was rushed to the hospital, two men who tortured him for months vanished from the base. No goodbyes, no warnings, just gone. And the woman responsible for it wore the rank of captain and the heart of the sweetest person you'd ever meet. This is the story of how she found out and what she did about it. If you've ever watched someone in power look the other way while a good person got torn down, and then watched karma finally show up wearing the right uniform, this story is for you. Stick around till the end, because the way this ends is something I still think about years later. Hit subscribe, and let's get into it. Before I tell you what happened, let me introduce myself, because I was there for all of it. I joined the United States Navy in my early 20s, and like most 19 and 20-year-olds who signed that contract, I had no idea what I was actually walking into. Boot camp breaks you down and rebuilds you into someone who can survive on 4 hours of sleep and instant coffee. It was there, in that chaos, that I met a guy who would become one of my closest friends. I'm going to call him Bill. That's what we called him back then, and that's how I'll remember him for you now. Bill was not built like a Navy recruiting poster. He was short, a little soft around the middle. He wore glasses that constantly fogged up during PT. If you lined up 100 sailors and asked a stranger to guess which one would struggle physically, they might have pointed at Bill. But here's what that stranger would have missed. Bill was one of the smartest people I have ever met. We ended up in the same training pipeline to become sonar technicians. The guys who sit in a dark room on a submarine and listen to the ocean, distinguishing a whale from a fishing boat, from an enemy vessel by sound alone. It's a job for pattern recognition, for math, for the kind of quiet, methodical brain that doesn't panic. Bill had that brain. Given the chance, he would have been exceptional at that job. Genuinely exceptional. But he never got that chance. And here's why. Our training command had two petty officers overseeing our physical conditioning. I want you to picture the stereotype of a guy who thinks he's auditioning for a Navy SEAL recruitment poster, except his actual job is sitting at a sonar console listening for submarines. A job that requires patience and intelligence far more than it requires a max deadlift. These two had convinced themselves they were something they weren't, and they took that delusion out on Bill. 3 times a week, we ran physical training together. Most of us kept pace fine. Bill, more often than not, fell a little behind. Not failing. He consistently met the minimum standard the Navy actually required. Just not fast enough, not hard enough, not impressive enough for these two. So they went after him. Not once. Not as a one-time joke that went too far. Constantly. Week after week. They called him fat, called him lazy, called him worthless. And I want you to sit with this one. They told him he should kill himself. Read that again. Two men whose job was to train and mentor young sailors looked at a 20-year-old kid who was doing everything the Navy actually asked of him and told him to end his life. Not once, as far as I know. Repeatedly. Casually. Like it was just another insult in the rotation. And Bill absorbed all of it. Because that's what you do when you're new. When you're trying to prove yourself. When the men screaming at you hold power over whether you stay in the career you've built your entire identity around. Bill pushed himself. Hard. Trying to silence them. Trying to prove he belonged. And eventually, his body gave out. He injured his knee badly enough that he had to see the base doctor, who examined him and put him on light duty. Official paperwork. Official orders. No ambiguity. Bill wasn't supposed to be running on that knee. Full stop. He brought that paperwork to the two petty officers. They looked at it, and they told him if he didn't keep doing full workouts, they'd kick him out of the program. Think about the position that put him in. A direct medical order versus two men threatening his entire career if he obeyed it. So Bill did what a scared, exhausted 20-year-old does. He kept pushing through pain on an already injured knee, while his mental health quietly eroded underneath him, unnoticed by anyone with the authority to stop it. There's something you should understand about military life in that era. There wasn't a therapist's office down the hall. Mental health resources, as we'd recognize them today, basically didn't exist for young enlisted sailors. The one person you could talk to, really talk to, was the chaplain. Our chaplain was a small, warm, soft-spoken woman. If you'd passed her in a grocery store, you'd have guessed schoolteacher, maybe librarian. But under Navy rank structure, a chaplain holds an officer's commission, and ours held the rank of captain. high enough that when she spoke, people above these two petty officers had to listen. Bill scheduled a meeting with her. He was ready to talk. Ready, maybe, to get help before things got worse. When he told the two petty officers he'd be missing a class session for that meeting, they unloaded on him, called him a pussy, told him he was too weak for the Navy, told him the chaplain wouldn't care, that nobody would care, that this was just one more example of him not being cut out for this life. They threatened to make things even harder on him if he went. Bill canceled the meeting. I need you to really absorb that moment, because it's the hinge the entire rest of the story swings on. The one door to help that existed for him. They slammed it shut, deliberately, with words designed to make sure he never tried to open it again. That same night, Bill's girlfriend ended things with him. On its own, that's just a bad night. Stacked on top of months of relentless psychological abuse from two men in positions of power over him, with the one outlet for support freshly closed off, it was too much. At 3 a.m, my phone rang. Bill's name on the screen. I answered. Silence on the other end. I said his name a few times. Bill, you there? You okay? Nothing came back but quiet. Sailors drunk dial each other constantly after hard days, and I chalked it up to that. I hung up and went back to sleep. I still think about that decision. I probably always will. What I didn't know that night was that Bill had hurt himself badly enough that he physically couldn't speak into the phone. Several of us got that same silent call. None of us understood what it meant until the next day. If you're going through something heavy right now, please don't sit with it alone. Reach out to someone, a hotline, a friend, anyone. It matters more than you think. The next morning, calls started coming in from Bill's now ex-girlfriend. Bill was in the hospital. He had tried to take his own life. We rushed over the moment we could. What we later learned was almost unbelievable. The cold that night had caused his wound to clot on the outside in a way that kept him alive, just long enough for EMS to reach him. The doctor said the injury missed a major artery by about 1 millimeter. A single millimeter between Bill living the rest of his life and not. As we arrived at the hospital, we passed the chaplain on her way out. She stopped just long enough to tell us Bill would be okay. And then she said 5 words I have never forgotten. I won't forget this. I have never, before or since, seen an expression like the one on her face in that hallway. This tiny, gentle, soft-spoken woman, and in her eyes was the purest, most controlled rage I have ever witnessed on another human being. It didn't look like an outburst waiting to happen. It looked like a decision that had already been made. We went in and saw Bill. He was weak, barely able to talk, but he told us what had happened, what those two men had said to him for months, what he'd been thinking that night, and how relieved, in the daylight, he was that he had survived. A week passed with no news. Then the chief of the training command, the boss of the two petty officers, called several of us in individually. He said he wanted to check on us, and to find out if there were other issues with these two men that he wasn't aware of. That question told us everything. This wasn't a routine wellness check. This was building a case. I told him about a time one of them had chewed me out over something they'd flat out lied to him about. My friends brought their own examples, other instances of these two being cruel, dishonest, abusive toward the sailors under them. I don't think our stories changed the outcome. I think their fate had already been decided the moment the chaplain walked out of that hospital. We were just handing over more evidence to bury them with. The very next day, both petty officers were gone. No announcement. No goodbye. New instructors took over our training, permanently, like the old ones had never existed. After class, I went to find the chaplain and asked her, point blank, what happened. She told me she had never in her career been more disgusted by the actions of a sailor than she was by these two men who had actively talked a suffering young sailor out of getting help. She teared up telling me this part. She deeply regretted never getting the chance to sit down with Bill before he reached his breaking point. In her eyes, these two hadn't just failed to help him. They had actively pushed him toward the edge. Here's what she'd done. She went straight to the admiral in command of the entire base and demanded both men be discharged immediately. He granted it, no hesitation. Within days, both petty officers were processed out, other than honorable discharges, the kind that follows you for the rest of your civilian life. No VA benefits, no access to the base, housing they'd been living in. When you're separated like that, The Navy doesn't fly your family or your belongings home. You get a single one-way bus ticket, and that's it. And here's the part that really lands. An other than honorable discharge blacklists you from working for any company holding a Department of Defense contract. That's not a small list. That's McDonald's, Subway, Taco Bell, any chain with a location on a military base, which is most of them. They're not legally allowed to hire you. Every door that even entry-level jobs normally offer gone. One of these men had 18 years in the Navy. 2 years, just 2, from a full pension and retirement. Gone in a single week because of how he chose to treat a 20-year-old kid who never did anything but try his best. The other had 12 years in and lost nearly as much. Wherever they ended up, I'd be shocked to hear either of them is making more than minimum wage today. As for Bill, he recovered fully. He was granted a medical discharge, an honorable one, which under Navy rules meant he'd draw pay at his rank for the rest of his life, keep full benefits, and was connected with a counselor back in his home state, all paid for. We lost touch over the years, the way people do. But a while back I found him on social media. He'd rebuilt his life completely, became a police officer, got married, looked genuinely happy in every photo that I think about that hallway a lot. About how easy it would have been for that chaplain to write it off as not her department, to let the Navy's slow bureaucracy handle it, to let 2 careers matter more than one sailor's life. She didn't. She used every bit of the rank she carried to make sure 2 men, who weaponized their authority against someone weaker, never got to do it to anyone else. Justice doesn't always look like a courtroom. Sometimes it looks like a small woman with a captain's insignia, walking out of a hospital hallway with her mind already made up. If this story hit you the way it hit me, smash that like button and drop a comment. Have you ever seen someone in a position of power actually use it to protect the people underneath them? I want to hear those stories. And if you want more real accounts like this one, subscribe. There's plenty more where this came from.